What's up and welcome back. I'm John Stark, MacMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic, and today we're going to talk about 100 Years of Solitude. It's a new Netflix series. It's being released in 2 parts, 16 episodes, the first 8 episodes. I did not watch all of the 8 episodes because it does not have audio description, which is such a shame because this is such a well-known title. It's a classic novel. Yes, it's a Spanish language novel. I know. However, they did create an English dub. They just did not create an English audio description track for this film. So the debate here isn't about whether or not this is for me as an English speaking white man. The debate is whether or not this is for blind people. And honestly, I was really looking forward to this as one of the few titles because I was like, ooh, Netflix is adapting into a series. The Gabriel Garcia Marquez book. And that, you know, it intrigued me. And I heard that it had a pretty decent budget. It's sort of set in a little bit of it mixes a little bit of reality with fantasy. So I'm sure that there's a lot of stuff here that's worth describing. There's the dub cast is actually really excellent. Like, honestly, like props. Sometimes you get people who just feel like they're really bad actors. I thought they were really excellent. The only thing that I would say is don't lose that flavor. This is very much a, born and bred Spanish, language thing. So obviously these characters, we can find people who sound like they're English speaking Latinx population. You know what I'm saying? Like those people exist. And I kind of felt like that with Apple Plus's Women in Blue. I'm a little bit worried about whitewashing too much. I know localization is a thing, but with America, one of the greatest things that we are is a melting pot. It's harder to do it in other countries. I would imagine localization for India, you just have to kind of go, well, you know, or, some other countries, China, and they're doing it. But we have so much, we have the richness of America is that we have all this stuff here, and we have such a huge Latino population. Like, it's lazy to not to not find Latinx sounding voice talent for everything. It wasn't, but they were good. These were good voice actors that were really taking the time to think about what it was they were saying instead of just reading things where it sounds like, do you know the context of what it is that you're saying, or are you just reading words? Like, did they only give you your like, you didn't get a script, you just got, this is what your character says, and we need you to read these lines into a microphone. Because I've heard that before. That feels like those are movies too. And that's what directors are always afraid of when they think about dubbing and when they think about audio description that would include dubbing, is they're like, oh god, those awful dub tracks where everybody sounds horrendous. They don't sound anything like they're supposed to. And it gets sort of cheesy and cartoonish almost. Here, that's not it. All I needed to do was provide audio description. All I needed to do is slap an audio description track on it. But unfortunately, I'm not going to move forward past the first episode because of the audio description. I did watch the first episode, to be fair, because I do this thing where I'm like, if this is how you're going to present it to me, if you believe that this is watchable, it's not. There's like a long opening to this before anybody speaks too, where I was like, what's happening? I was like, is there text? What are we doing? And then finally we get like a narrator that comes in. It's not a narrator, it's like internal monologue is what it is. Laid over how the story progresses. And like, it's just weird to watch things, but there's like a sex scene in the first episode. And I don't know. I think there were 2 actually. But the only way that is because you're listening. It's like, was it Jim Carrey in Liar Liar when he had to make sex noises in the court case? And it's just like, you're like, and then and you're like, I guess we're having a sex scene now. It's awkward as a blind person to have no context as to what's going on, and to just have to be like, well, they're moaning, they're panting. Um, Not to get too X-rated, but people are like, "Do you watch porn as a blind person?" I'm like, I don't know. No, I don't. Because, like, auditorily, I don't know. Like, I think I'd be way more into, which I have never explored, but because you'd have to get like a really good. I don't want. It's weird. I don't want really robotic voices to read shit to me that's erotic. Do you know what I'm saying? But like, I'd be way more into like a good Fabio novel now, you know? But it has to be read by somebody who understands what they're reading, and not like my screen reader. So I have to find an audiobook of somebody who's willing to like really get into it and do like find like that sexy voice, right? For it to work. So things the perspective wildly changes when you lose your vision. You're just like, I don't know if this works. So for me, there's nothing sexy about just hearing people go instead I'm just like, I guess this is a sex scene. There's no audio description to support it, so that's where my mind's going. Which is always interesting. I'll address the fact that this is an adaptation of a classic book, and I know people always sort of approach these things with trepidation, even though we've adapted Jane Austen like a bajillion times. Um, and so there are some authors out there who they're like, oh, we can't adapt that work. Oh, it's sacred. um, I don't know, some other stuff we've adapted like 5,000 times. I mean, how many Little Women adaptations are there? And most of them are good. There's that weird one where they tried to modernize it. That doesn't work. But yeah, if you get the right person behind it, and the argument is that with a book, like we have like our imagination, right? It's allowed to run wild. So in that moment, I guess there'd be like the love making scene would be written out for me, and I would have been able to understand the text and be like, ooh, this is very well written and stuff. And without audio description, everything is just reduced to grunting. So they're valid. And that's how Netflix has chosen for me to consume this. That is so. Yeah, it's almost like when you don't put audio description on it, it like supports that, because then I'm limited to a mix. Like I don't even get an attempt at giving me the vision of the showrunners and the creators and the directors of this to give me what their vision for 100 Years of Solitude is, because I just get sort of like sound. So it's like getting a soundtrack to a book, you know, and you're getting like you're being assigned voices for characters and stuff, but you're not really, but all the visual stuff, like your imagination is still allowed to run wild that way. So like in the sex scene, like I have no idea what's happening, so I could just imagine anything in that scene with grunting, you know. So instead of having either the freedom of the book to let the text melt with my own imagination and create its own experience, or in a completely different situation to be able to fully immerse myself in an auteur's sort of vision of what that book could look like on cinema, and use a budget to their full advantage and to adapt it in a way. I think the fact that this is being adapted to a series and not a movie, for example, helps support the fact that a lot of the content will remain here, and trying to do it in a way that you're not trying to just regurgitate source material. I think that's interesting, but when you do it in the middle, it's weird. It's very weird. I had a very weird experience with the first episode. It wasn't fun. I would come back again to this if it ever picked up audio description, because again, I was actually excited for this, But I wanted to put this out there for the world because I think a lot of people might be might see this in their Netflix queue and be excited for it. It doesn't have audio description. It does have dubbing, but it's kind of a bitch to follow. So I wouldn't do it. So thanks Netflix once again, making weird choices. There's I noticed while I was browsing, there's like a new Norwegian show that has audio description. Cool. Thanks. I'll watch that, I guess, instead of, you know, your high budget adaptation of a classic novel. I'm going to give 100 Years of Solitude the grade of unwatchable, which is probably what Marquez would love for me to give it, although it's very sort of unfulfilling considering Love in the Time of Cholera was not well received. It would be nice if this was, so that, you know, maybe not all of his adaptations were, but I'm not adding to the whatever. If people are loving this, I can't add to that because there's nothing to support me adding to it. It's not accessible to blind people. So there you go. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And I will see you guys on the other side.